The land of the rising sun dominated Meydan. Let's talk about the UAE Derby and Dubai World Cup. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host to this very special reaction episode of Trust the Prophets. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and you can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Well, we are going to talk today about the reaction to the UAE Derby and the Dubai World Cup. I hope you woke up early this morning. The races in Meydan started at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time. If you live on the West Coast, I'm sorry. But if you live on the East Coast, hopefully you got up. My 17-year-old Jack Russell Terrier always wakes me up at 7 o'clock. So I was ready to roll for the races. But here's the thing. This was a dominant effort today by Japan. And so I wanted to do this video real quick to talk about what did we learn today about the UAE Derby, Dubai World Cup? What were some of the things, the big takeaways, the reactions to all of this? And so let's start at the top with the UAE Derby. It is an amazing effort. If you watch the preview video, I talked about how much I like the horses from Japan, Dora Eride, Derma Sotogake, and Perrieri. I love those horses. And there was a question about Cairo. Cairo was a horse that I was pretty high on in terms of the horse's overall form. But I think that as the week wore on, you started hearing a little bit more about the fact that maybe Cairo wasn't taking to the dirt as well as you would hope. And that was a concern. And ultimately, when the UAE Derby opened up the gates, the two Japanese horses, Dura Eride and Derma Sotogake, went out to the lead. And I have to be honest with you, the UAE Derby might be the most impressive Kentucky Derby prep performance that I have seen yet this year. That was the first time I said, wow, when I watched a horse run. It was so impressive because it was unlike anything we had seen to this point on the Derby trail. What do I mean by that? Derma Sotogake, a horse that, as I talked about on the preview, craves distance, was distance limited last time, I would argue, in the Saudi Derby. Wants more ground, wants that 9-10 furlong distance. Derma Sotogake goes out to the front. We haven't seen horses win from on the lead. Arabian Night was really the only horse that we saw this entire Derby trail who was won that way in the Southwest. And of course, Arabian Night is off the trail now. All of these other major contenders, Forte, Practical Move, Instant Coffee, Confidence Game, Angel of Empire, Sun Thunder, all of these horses, they're closers, they're mid-pack horses, they're stalkers at best. But there's no horse that we've seen wire field. And we just saw Derma Sotogake go wire to wire, repel his biggest challenger of Dura Eride, his fellow Japanese runner, and not just win easy. I mean, it was a hand ride, never felt the whip, and it was so impressive, drawing off by 6 lengths and never being asked. And it was just such an impressive effort. And the thing is, we know that dirt was a little speed favoring, but it wasn't that speed favoring because we saw the pace collapse in the Dubai World Cup, which we're going to talk about in a second, and open it up for closers. So we know the track was fair in terms of not just being this conveyor belt for front end speed, but Derma Sotogake, that's the storyline for the UAE Derby. That's a horse he's absolutely coming over. The connections have already confirmed he is coming over for the Kentucky Derby. And here's the thing. There are some people who are going to say, and some people I really respect, Ed DeRosa from Horse Racing Nation is one of these people. And I don't generally disagree with him on this point, which is to say the UAE Derby winner historically has had no success at the Kentucky Derby. And he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Those horses have never had any success in this race. The best finish was a 5th place finish by a UAE Derby winner. Okay. My counterpoint to that is, first of all, Japan has been building up to this. This has been a process. You cannot necessarily evaluate past Japanese runners who have come over to what has happened in Dubai. All right. And I think that this is an evolution of what we're seeing from Japan because we're seeing it on the world stage and we're seeing it all over. That Japan has come to play, and Japan has a very deep stable of very good dirt horses. Here's the other thing. This is not last year with Summer is Tomorrow and Crown Pride and these horses that are just going to burn you up on the front end. Yes, Derma Sotogake went to the front end. But if you have watched Derma Sotogake's other races, then you know that he's not naturally a front runner. This is a horse that absolutely can win sitting mid-pack, not even stalking, sitting mid-pack. Perfectly comfortable doing that. So he's a horse that has versatility. But here's the real kicker. As we've talked about, none of the main contenders have any speed. There is limited speed that's going to get into this race. Maybe a horse like Kingsbarns in the Louisiana Derby, if he runs well, will get there. Okay. Maybe a horse like Go Rocket Ride, a Richard Mandela horse, who I think is very promising out in California. Maybe that's a horse that's going to get out in the lead. But there's not a ton of early speed in this race. So if Derma Sotogake comes over and wants to go to the lead, he may not have much opposition there. And that I think is very dangerous, particularly for a horse that when you look at the pedigree, particularly on the dam side, when you look at the pedigree, this horse wants more and more and more distance. Okay. So I'm very high on this horse. I try not to be a prisoner of the moment. That was an extremely professional and extremely impressive performance that we witnessed out of Derma Sotogake. And Dora Erode, who ran second, was 5-6 lengths clear of anybody else in second place, third place as well. So very impressive performance there. I'm glad I got the order mixed up when in the preview. I wasn't right about that, but at least I told you these two horses were not to be trifled with. These two horses were the real deal coming over from Japan, and they certainly ran like it. And just an incredible effort there from them. Another takeaway from the UAE Derby, Bob Baffert's entry, Worcester. This is a horse that, Worcester, I'm not sure. I'm not going to go Worcester. I'm not going to go the hard O, but Worcester that's a horse that didn't break particularly well. You thought he would be pretty forwardly placed. Historically, he has been in his other races, and there wasn't anticipated to be a whole lot of early speed. By the way, that is evident by the fact that Derma Sotogake went to the lead. There wasn't much other speed in this race because he's not naturally a speed horse. But Worcester blew the break and then kind of came up along the outside and made some nice progress around the first turn and down the backside. But you could tell it was just completely out of it by the time they were coming for home, just didn't have anything left. So disappointing effort there for him. But that was all about Japan because Continuar finished third. That was another Japanese horse. Perrier finished fourth. That was another Japanese horse. So Japan went 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you very much. And there was really no competition from anyone else. By the way, they only entered 5 horses in the race. And so they finished 1 through 4. Absolutely incredible effort from them. And just like I said, such a solid performance from Derma Sotogake. So excited to see him come over. And obviously, one of the big question marks will be, how does he take to the Churchill Downs dirt? Okay. There's always questions about that. How do international horses take to American dirt tracks? That's something to keep in mind. So you don't want to just pencil this horse in as, oh, he's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 favorites. You want to see how things play out. But there's a lot of reasons to think that this is the year that maybe the tide starts to turn towards Japan, and maybe we see a historical effort out of a UAE Derby winner. Does that mean he wins? Maybe not, but something that hits the board even would be a historical moment for the winner of the UAE Derby. Well, let's talk about the Dubai World Cup as well. And that was a thrilling race also, with a strong pace set by Pantalasa and Bendug, those two, and Remorse. And they went out there up on the front end. And, one of the things we talked about was we knew where Pantalasa was going to be. But I did the preview video before they drew the actual post positions. So they had assigned all the horses their number, but they hadn't assigned them post positions yet. When they assigned the post positions, it was tough for the 3 favorites, for Algiers, for Country Grammar, and particularly for Pantalasa, who had to really cross and clear the entire field, used up a ton of early speed to get there, and then appropriately just dropped anchor at some point coming for home. But that was an aggressive early pace. Algiers looked like he was going to be the winner. I mean, he really loomed up nicely. It was moving very well. It was really performing better than I was anticipating for him to perform. But that early speed got the best of the field, and out of left field comes Ushba Tesoro all the way from the back, who is sitting dead last at first call. That's the horse, Ushba Tesoro, who ends up coming running late. Teo Keen's running fourth, a horse that I had mentioned. Ushba Tesoro is a horse that in the preview I was a little down on. The horse had great a great recent form, but I was a little concerned about the quality of horses he had been beating in Japan. But here's the thing, the pace just set up so well for him in this spot. So it really did set up nicely for Ushba Tesoro. That's not to take any credit away from him, but that was just a perfect setup for him. And he came running late and just looked so good coming down the stretch. But I think the big takeaway from this is a horse like Country Grammar and what happened to Country Grammar, because that was a horse I was very high on, obviously. The post draw was not great. When I saw the post draw, I was like, that's not ideal. I was a little surprised that Frankie hustled him up as close to the lead as he did. I kind of understand why he did it, because I think he was trying to save as much ground as he could. The thing is, Country Grammar got caught wide every single stretch of the way. I mean, he was super wide going around. He was pretty wide going around the first turn. He was wide all the way down the backstretch. Not that that really matters, but then because he was wide down the backstretch, it does matter, because then he got caught very wide coming for home, going around the third and fourth turn. It was it was just a really wide trip for a horse that was just grinding away and doesn't have, as we've talked about, doesn't have that blazing turn of foot, doesn't have that blazing early speed. He's a grinder, and that was just really tough to be that wide the entire time and just be giving up so much ground to the other horses. And then when you set him down and come for home, he just didn't have much left, because he had been, Frankie had used a lot of his early speed to get into what he thought was going to be a better position. Again, I understand the logic behind the ride. It just didn't pan out for him, which is too bad, because Country Grammar, is a horse that I like. I mean, I like that style of horse. I like grinders, and I typically like horses that just kind of keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. But obviously, today was not his day at all. So not a good day for Bob Baffert between Worcester and between Country Grammar as well. So, but it was a day for Japan. And by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the most impressive thing we saw today. Derma Sotogake, super impressive. Ushba Tesoro, incredibly impressive. But here's the real thing, Equinox. Can we talk about Equinox for a second in the Dubai turf? Oh my God, was that the most impressive thing I've saw today, and maybe that I will see for the whole weekend, and maybe for the whole month, and maybe for the whole year, the way things are going, because Equinox is just this dominant Japanese turf horse who was 4 for 6 winning coming into this race, 6 for 6 in the exacta, had never finished worse than second, and had been doing it in grade one competition. 4-year-old colt out of Japan comes to Dubai and runs the race of his life in many ways. But it is the race that we expected him to run and hoped that he would run. And he ran it, because he went to the lead and he divvied out the pace. And then when they came for home, he had a world-class group of people chasing him. He had a horse like Rebels Romance, who we saw crush the competition last time out at the Breeders' Cup turf. So that's who's chasing him. A horse like Mostadev, okay? A horse like Rebels Romance. These are really good horses. These are not just really good. These are great horses that were chasing him. And he wasn't even asked. They come to the home stretch. He was still under a hand ride. He was still being held back in the stretch while everyone else was going all out and being set down. He is still under a hand ride. Finally, they let him out a little bit. And I mean, see you later. He pulls off by 6-7 lengths and then gets geared down at the end to win by 4. And oh, by the way, sets the track record by a second. Knocks a second off the track record that was set by Mistrif just 2 years ago. Absolutely incredible effort from Equinox. It is one of those things where the Japanese are dominating on the turf. They're dominating on the dirt. I told you that, Team USA lost to Team Japan in the World Baseball Classic, and we would get used to some of the same treatment on the racetrack. And that absolutely ended up being true in the UAE Derby. It ended up being true in the Dubai World Cup. It ended up being true, obviously, with Equinox on the turf. It was a day for Japan, as it always is on these big days. And I think the next step, the thing that I'm excited to see, is these Japanese horses coming over to the United States and running in the Kentucky Derby. I'm excited for that. I'm also thrilled that this year's Breeders' Cup is in Santa Anita, because it's going to mean we're going to get a lot of Japanese entries coming over to run in all of our Breeders' Cup races. That's going to be wonderful, because when you watch on days like today at Meydan, it's obvious the best horses in the world are not in the United States anymore. The best horses in the world, especially on turf, we've always known are in Europe, but now some of them are in Japan, and the best dirt horses in the world, well, they might just be in Japan too. And so the American supremacy in dirt horse racing is being eroded away slowly but surely by the Japanese. And the thing that I will always go back to about them is they do things the right way. They have built this sport the right way. They have been breeding the right way. They have been coming over here and being very aggressive in the Keeneland sales and buying the right type of brood mares and bringing over the right type of sires and expanding their pedigree beyond just the Sunday Silence generation. And it has been something to witness and something to see. And you can't help but be excited for new faces on the global stage and new faces potentially in Louisville the first Saturday in May. All right. Well, that's the reaction from Meydan, the UAE Derby, and the Dubai World Cup. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure to press that like button on the video. Comment below with what your reactions were to just an amazing day over in Meydan. Let me know what you think about whether or not you like Derma Sotagake's chances in the Kentucky Derby, or whether you think I'm crazy. And that's okay if you think I'm crazy. Make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits here on YouTube. Make sure to tune back later today. We got the live reaction to the Louisiana Derby. We got the live reaction to the Jeff Ruby Stakes. We'll even have the live reaction tomorrow to the Sunland Park Derby as well, out in my old stomping ground in New Mexico and West Texas. So make sure to check all that stuff out. Well, until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.